October 1st, 1946, Nuremberg, Germany. 21 men sit motionless in a courtroom, their faces drained of color. These aren't ordinary criminals. They're the architects of humanity's darkest chapter. Former generals, ministers, and industrialists who once commanded armies of millions now wait in silence as judges prepare to deliver their fates. After 10 grueling months of testimony, evidence, and damning revelations, the moment of reckoning has arrived. The International Military Tribunal is about to hand down sentences that will echo through history and send a chilling message to tyrants everywhere. 12 of these men will hang. One of them, a field marshal who signed orders that killed millions, will die in a way so horrific that witnesses would later describe it as poetic justice. His name was Wilhelm Keitel. And this is the true story of how Hitler's most obedient soldier met his end on the gallows. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of World War II, you're in the right place. Here at Timeless World, we uncover the military secrets, forgotten battles, and controversial figures that shaped our world. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell so you never miss another episode. Now, let's dive into one of history's most disturbing stories: the making of a yes man. Wilhelm Keitel entered the world on September 22, 1882, in the tiny village of Helmscherode within the German Empire. Born into a landowning family, young Wilhelm dreamed of inheriting his father's estates and living the comfortable life of rural aristocracy. But his father refused to step aside. With no inheritance coming his way, Keitel made a fateful decision in 1901. He joined the Prussian army as an artillery officer. It was a choice that would eventually place him at the right hand of history's most notorious dictator. When the First World War erupted across Europe, Keitel served on the blood-soaked Western Front. As a battery commander in Flanders during 1914, a shrapnel grenade tore into his body, leaving him seriously wounded. Most soldiers would have been sent home permanently. But Keitel possessed something the German military desperately needed: exceptional organizational skills. After recovering from his wounds, he was transferred to the Army General Staff, where he discovered his true calling. Not as a battlefield commander, but as a bureaucrat, a paper pusher, a man who could make the machinery of war run smoothly without asking uncomfortable questions. This quality would later prove invaluable to Adolf Hitler. The secret rearmament. Following Germany's crushing defeat in World War I, the Treaty of Versailles slashed the German military to just 100,000 men. The victorious Allied powers believed they had permanently defanged the German war machine. They were catastrophically wrong. In 1924, Wilhelm Keitel received a transfer to the Ministry of the Reichswehr in Berlin. Here, he joined the Truppenamt, a shadowy agency designed to hide the existence of a prohibited German general staff from international inspectors. What Keitel did next would set the stage for the deadliest conflict in human history. Working in secrecy, he played a critical role in rebuilding German military power. He helped plan the reorganization and eventual expansion of the German army, all in direct violation of international law. While the world believed Germany was disarmed, Keitel was quietly preparing the foundations for a military machine that would eventually conquer most of Europe. When the Nazis seized power in January 1933, Wilhelm Keitel saw opportunity. He immediately aligned himself with the new regime and became what German officers would later call, with undisguised contempt, Hitler's loyal yes man. A dog-like devotion. In 1935, Keitel received a significant promotion. He became head of the Armed Forces Office at the Reich Ministry of War, overseeing the German Army, Navy, and Air Force. 3 years later, when the Ministry of War was dissolved, it was replaced by the Supreme Command of the Armed Forces, the OKW. Adolf Hitler appointed himself Commander-in-Chief, and to everyone's shock, he made Wilhelm Keitel the Chief of Staff. The reaction among German generals was one of disbelief and disgust. Fellow officers openly mocked Keitel behind his back. They called him a blindingly loyal toady and a stupid follower of Hitler. Many simply bypassed him entirely, going straight to the Führer because they knew Keitel was merely a rubber stamp. But Hitler didn't want a military genius. He wanted obedience. The Führer himself once remarked that Keitel was as loyal as a dog. Hitler fully understood that Keitel possessed limited intellect and a nervous disposition. He simply didn't care. What mattered was that Keitel would never question orders, never push back, never develop an independent thought that might complicate the Führer's plans. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe and one of the most powerful Nazis, delivered perhaps the most divesting assessment. Keitel had a sergeant's mind inside a field marshal's body. The invasion of Poland and the rewards of loyalty. On September 1, 1939, German forces stormed across the Polish border. World War II had begun. Wilhelm Keitel was intimately involved in planning this invasion, and he knew exactly what it would entail. This wasn't merely a military campaign. Mass arrests, forced population transfers, and systematic murders had all been planned well in advance. When German officers began reporting the atrocities they witnessed in Poland, the executions, the roundups, the burning villages, Keitel's response was telling. He ignored them. He said nothing as complaints piled up from field commanders who were disturbed by what they were ordered to do. He remained silent until those same officers became morally numb to the horrors unfolding before them. In this way, Keitel didn't just follow criminal orders, he helped normalize them. And Hitler rewarded him handsomely. After the successful conquest of Poland, Wilhelm Keitel received a loyalty bonus of 100,000 Reichsmarks, a fortune at the time. It was blood money, payment for his complicity in mass murder, and Keitel accepted it without hesitation. The humiliation of France. On May 10, 1940, German forces launched their invasion of Western Europe. Within 6 weeks, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands had all fallen to the Nazi war machine. For Adolf Hitler, defeating France wasn't enough. He wanted to humiliate them. In 1918, Germany had surrendered to the Allied powers in a railway car in the Compiègne forest. For over 20 years, that rail car sat in a museum, a permanent reminder of German defeat. Hitler ordered it retrieved. On June 22, 1940, French representatives were forced to sign their surrender in the exact same location, in the exact railway car where Germany had been humiliated a generation earlier. The man who signed for Germany was Wilhelm Keitel. Shortly afterward, Keitel was promoted to Field Marshal. But this prestigious rank did nothing to change how his peers viewed him. To them, he remained what he had always been, a spineless servant who had risen far beyond his capabilities simply because he never said no. Orders written in blood. Starting in April 1941, Wilhelm Keitel began issuing a series of orders that would make him one of history's most prolific war criminals. These weren't suggestions or guidelines, they were direct commands authorizing mass murder. Keitel ordered German troops on the Eastern Front to use unusual severity against any resistance. His instructions specified that for every German soldier killed, between 50 and 100 communists should be executed in retaliation. The category of communist was deliberately vague. It could mean anyone. He signed the authorization for executing enemy special operations troops even when those soldiers were captured in proper military uniform, which, under the law of war, entitled them to prisoner of war status and protection. Then came the Night and Fog Decree. This chilling order authorized the nighttime abduction of suspected resistance members across occupied Europe. These prisoners would simply vanish. No trial, no record, no information given to their families. They would disappear into the night and fog, never to be seen again. Keitel also signed orders targeting the innocent families of Allied volunteers, authorizing reprisals against civilians whose only crime was being related to someone fighting against Nazi Germany. The death toll from Keitel's orders is impossible to calculate precisely, but it numbers in the millions. The bomb plot and Rommel's death. By the summer of 1944, Germany was losing the war. Allied forces had landed in Normandy, Soviet armies were pushing westward, and within Hitler's inner circle, a group of German officers decided the only way to save their country was to kill the Führer. On July 20th, 1944, a bomb exploded in Hitler's headquarters during a military briefing. Miraculously, Hitler survived, shielded from the worst of the blast by a heavy oak table. It was Wilhelm Keitel who personally led the wounded Hitler out of the smoke-filled room. What followed was a purge of shocking brutality. Thousands were arrested, hundreds were executed, many tortured first. And Keitel threw himself into the persecution of the conspirators with enthusiasm. One of those implicated was Erwin Rommel, the legendary Desert Fox and one of Germany's most famous military commanders. Whether Rommel was truly involved in the assassination attempt remains debated by historians to this day, but Hitler believed he was guilty. On October 14, 1944, two generals arrived at Rommel's home. They had been sent by Wilhelm Keitel, carrying Hitler's orders. Rommel was given a choice: face a public court-martial that would destroy his reputation and endanger his family, or take poison and receive a hero's funeral. Rommel chose the poison. The official story claimed Germany's greatest tank commander had died from wounds sustained in an Allied air attack. The truth, that he had been forced to kill himself on Hitler's orders, delivered by Keitel, wouldn't emerge until after the war. The final signature. On May 8, 1945, Wilhelm Keitel sat down in Berlin to perform his final official act. Before him lay the German Instrument of Surrender, the document that would officially end the Third Reich and conclude World War II in Europe. With his signature, Nazi Germany ceased to exist. It was a fitting end to Keitel's career. Just as he had rubber-stamped every criminal order Hitler ever issued, he now signed away the regime he had served so faithfully. But justice was coming. Within days, Keitel was arrested by Allied forces. He would soon find himself in Nuremberg, facing charges that carried the death penalty. Judgment at Nuremberg. The Nuremberg trials represented something unprecedented in human history, an international tribunal holding individuals accountable for crimes against humanity. Wilhelm Keitel faced 4 counts: conspiracy to commit crimes against peace, planning, initiating, and waging wars of aggression, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His own signatures appeared on order after order authorizing murder, torture, and persecution. Keitel's defense was as predictable as it was pathetic. He admitted knowing that many of Hitler's orders were illegal. He acknowledged understanding that the actions he authorized violated international law. But he insisted, again and again, that he was merely following orders. Everything was Hitler's responsibility, not his. Regarding the millions who died because of directives bearing his signature, Keitel offered this explanation. These atrocities developed one from the other, step by step, without any foreknowledge of the consequences. He claimed he would suffer more agony of conscience in his prison cell than anyone could ever know. The tribunal was unmoved. Prison psychiatrist G.M. Gilbert, who interviewed all the defendants, delivered a devastating assessment of Keitel's character. The man who had commanded millions, who had helped plan the conquest of Europe, who had signed death warrants for countless innocents, had no more backbone than a jellyfish. On October 1, 1946, the International Military Tribunal delivered its verdict: guilty on all 4 counts. The sentence: death by hanging. Keitel made one final request: that he be executed by firing squad as befitting a military officer. The tribunal refused. His crimes were criminal, not military. He would hang like a common murderer. The gallows. October 16, 1946, Execution Day. In the early morning hours, Wilhelm Keitel met with the prison chaplain. His words revealed a man desperately grasping for redemption he didn't deserve. "You have helped me more than you know," Keitel told the chaplain. "May Christ, my Savior, stand by me all the way. I shall need him so much." He received communion. Then guards led him to the gymnasium where the gallows had been erected. The hangman that day was American Army Sergeant John C. Woods. He had no documented experience as an executioner before the war. Some historians believe this was deliberate, that Woods was chosen specifically because his incompetence would cause the condemned men additional suffering. What happened next seems to support this theory. The gallows had been constructed with trapdoors too small for the condemned men's bodies. The drops calculated to snap their necks were insufficient. Instead of quick deaths, the 10 Nazi war criminals executed that morning died slow, agonizing deaths by strangulation. For Wilhelm Keitel, it was even worse. After speaking his final words, "I call on God Almighty to have mercy on the German people. More than 2 million German soldiers went to their death for the fatherland before me. I follow now my sons, all for Germany." The trapdoor opened. Keitel fell, but the small opening caused his head to strike the trapdoor's edge, inflicting painful injuries. The drop wasn't long enough to break his neck. And so, Wilhelm Keitel, the man who had signed orders condemning millions to terrible deaths, hung from the rope, convulsing in agony, for 28 minutes. Witnesses watched as the field marshal who had once stood at Hitler's right hand twisted and struggled at the end of the rope, unable to die quickly, unable to find the mercy he had never shown his victims. He was 64 years old. Afterward, his body was cremated, his ashes were scattered in the river Isar. No tears were shed for Wilhelm Keitel. The legacy. Wilhelm Keitel's story offers a disturbing lesson that remains relevant today. He wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He didn't personally pull triggers or operate gas chambers. He was something perhaps more dangerous, an educated, capable man who chose to surrender his conscience in exchange for power and position. Every signature, every rubber-stamped approval, every order passed along without objection, these were choices. And each choice led to another, until Keitel found himself so deep in criminality that there was no way back. The Nuremberg trials established a principle that still bides international law. Following orders is not a defense for crimes against humanity. Every individual bears personal responsibility for their actions, regardless of who commands them. Wilhelm Keitel learned this lesson too late. At the end of a rope, in a gymnasium in Nuremberg, dying the slow death he had sentenced so many others to suffer. He was 64 years old. Afterward, his body was cremated. His ashes were scattered in the river Isar. No tears were shed for Wilhelm Keitel. The legacy. Wilhelm Keitel's story offers a disturbing lesson that remains relevant today. He wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He didn't personally pull triggers or operate gas chambers. He was something perhaps more dangerous, an educated, capable man who chose to surrender his conscience in exchange for power and position. Every signature, every rubber-stamped approval, every order passed along without objection, these were choices. And each choice led to another, until Keitel found himself so deep in criminality that there was no way back. The Nuremberg trials established a principle that still guides international law. Following orders is not a defense for crimes against humanity. Every individual bears personal responsibility for their actions, regardless of who commands them. Wilhelm Keitel learned this lesson too late. At the end of a rope, in a gymnasium in Nuremberg, dying the slow death he had sentenced so many others to suffer. He was 64 years old. Afterward, his body was cremated. His ashes were scattered in the river Isar. No tears were shed for Wilhelm Keitel. The legacy. Wilhelm Keitel's story offers a disturbing lesson that remains relevant today. He wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He didn't personally pull triggers or operate gas chambers. He was something perhaps more dangerous, an educated, capable man who chose to surrender his conscience in exchange for power and position. Every signature, every rubber-stamped approval, every order passed along without objection, these were choices. And each choice led to another, until Keitel found himself so deep in criminality that there was no way back. The Nuremberg trials established a principle that still guides international law. Following orders is not a defense for crimes against humanity. Every individual bears personal responsibility for their actions, regardless of who commands them. Wilhelm Keitel learned this lesson too late. At the end of a rope, in a gymnasium in Nuremberg, dying the slow death he had sentenced so many others to suffer. He was 64 years old. Afterward, his body was cremated. His ashes were scattered in the river Isar. No tears were shed for Wilhelm Keitel. The legacy. Wilhelm Keitel's story offers a disturbing lesson that remains relevant today. He wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He didn't personally pull triggers or operate gas chambers. He was something perhaps more dangerous,
an educated, capable man who chose to surrender his conscience in exchange for power.
Video gave you chills. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when we drop our next investigation. And leave a comment below. Which Nazi war criminals should we cover next? The history they didn't teach you in school is right here. Don't miss it.